Hello, Farida Bawatura, one more time here with you, Director of Advance. So today we're going to talk about consultative status with the UN. And this, I had already mentioned that the ECOSOC, that this was our weakness. This is the issue with Algerian advocacy when it comes on international platforms and mechanism. This is what we lacked. This is basically our Algerian Achilles heel, if you will. So get ready, let's just dive in. So as promised, we're going to talk about consultative status. And again, this is our agenda. So what is the purpose of all of this? What are we really supposed to get from this presentation? Well, never fear, I am here. So we're going to basically try to get an understanding of what consultative status mean, as well as its significant. Okay, consultation status. Why do we care? The second thing we're going to do is we're going to analyze the numbers of NGOs with this status around North Africa, basically, and around Algeria. So we can really see, okay, is it good? Is it bad? How does it compare? All right, and then lastly, of course, sum it all up, is basically we're going to do a comparative analysis with Algeria in regards and really talk about the impact. How has this actually impacted Algerian civil society? How has this impacted our advocacy? So, without further ado, let's dive in. All right, so consultative status, what's the big hurrah about? Okay, well, consultative status really means that you're a consultant to the UN, meaning your input matters. This is when you see people speaking at events like the UPR, things of that nature. Oftentimes, you see Algerians speaking with joint statements, not individual. Why? Because they don't have, and we don't have, consultative status. Now, this is not because something is missing with Algerian civil societies. It is because it's a very political mechanism. And in aspect, we are disadvantaged in that sense. All right, so what does it matter? Well, with consultation status, you actually get access to the ground. So you basically get to go inside of the UN building, you get to go to events, you can hold events, for example, during the UPR, during that session inside of the UN. You also get to, of course, meet with diplomats. It's more credibility. You automatically get more affiliations, right? Because you're actually in there. So you get to know a lot of the large organizations, you get to network. Events at the UN are open to you. If the UN members or there's anything new or anything up, you're right there. You have representation. So you really get to be updated, you get to be networked, and you get to speak and hold events. And basically when you give a submission, it really matters, like you are listened to. So this is really honestly the issue when it comes to Algeria, since we don't have that. People who are listened to about Algeria in a mechanism that directly affects only Algerians are international organizations. Okay, so again, there's the ability to make a statement, which we had talked about. And also you get to meet with other like-minded NGOs, really build the network. Alrighty, so next right here is basically, okay, so this is great. What is this, how many organizations have it? What's Algeria like? Well, Algeria is actually not good in this aspect. And even by comparisons to our neighbors who really have more heightened situations when it comes to democracy, to expectations, really. We're still not up to par. And before, I do want to clarify that comparison before. There is the reality of normalcy. So you don't see the heightened advocacy the way you see it in Algerians, because Algerians do have a certain, we have a personality, we have a revolutionary personality, we have higher standards. And so, because we do, we tend to advocate more for situations. But please do not confuse the situation in thinking that an Algerian case is worse than Tunis or Morocco. For example, Algeria has 2 journalists currently in detention, which we are absolutely, they have to be freed, because again, that sets us to another trajectory, another completely mindset and culture, which we are not interested in. Morocco has 14. So just to show you a few, for example, pretrial detention for us in 2021, it had escalated to 19% from 8%. So for us, that's like, whoa, that's a big deal. Morocco has had over 40 since 2000. And Tunis makes both Morocco and Algeria look really good because it always had an over 50. In fact, in 2021, it had a 56 pretrial detention rate. Let's not confuse, and I think this is one of the things that we definitely need to talk about and really address public relations and diplomacy and basically politics with the real situation on the ground. Please do not think that other nations have it better than Algeria. It's actually quite the opposite. But with us Algerians, what we have to do is ensure that this current status does not become the norm, because it is dangerous when it becomes the norm. For example, you don't hear anyone in, oh, not anyone, but it's not really, they don't have the vocal advocacy that, for example, we do for pretrial detention. Yet they have nearly 60%. Why? Because it's been normal to them. They really had an over 50 since 2000. It's the same thing with Morocco. So again, we cannot fall into that normalcy of lowering our standards. This is why our advocacy is so important. So let's put that on hold and let's get to the pie. So why so low? ECOSOC is a very political mechanism. Just to clear, it's not just you would have to first get approval, of course, from Algeria. You would have to be endorsed from your country. But not only that, even if you do get endorsed and you would have to go through the council's quite political. And I will show you examples in a second. In fact, this had several issues being brought up. The US, the UK, and I believe nearly over 300 organizations actually wrote about this and complained. So look at the ECOSOC. All right, so Algeria has 4 in comparison to Tunis, who has 16. Obviously, Algeria is a much larger country. You even have Chad, and you have, of course, Niger and Mali. Okay, that are obviously in much worse situation than Algeria, that war-torn conflict, all of that. Yet still, they are much better on this rate. Here, really, you have, multiple times the amount. Okay, so what about countries like Mauritania, for example, has 37? And you will see an effect, because even though these are supposed to be human rights organizations, there's quite a bit of politics, because you can also see these countries who have a much worse situation than Algeria actually not have anything reported. Why? Well, because that's just the reality of the game. These organizations really serve as protection for the country as well from international interference, if you will. Morocco has 30. Okay, so Sudan 22, Egypt 32. So you can see we are by far the lowest, only 4. So ECOSOC status. ECOSOC status is something you basically need to maintain with a particular organ of the UN, and then once you do that, you'll have, for example, consultation status, depending on, of course, which type of consultation. So there are different types of consultation status. You have some for large, which is on a broad spectrum, and then you have some who are very concentrated. For example, they only give in a particular subject. Depends on the size of the organization, depends on what the organization does. So in essence, presently there's only really a very small percentage of NGOs that are actually going through to get the status, because there was again a huge political issue that had been going on before Algeria. We hardly have any, and it's quite evidently, as I will demonstrate later, been causing us major problems. So with ECOSOC, please do not think that the other nations have had these for a while. It's very interesting because only in the past few years that they've had this all of a sudden tremendous increase. There's also parallels, as they had the tremendous increase. It's not really the advocacy in their countries that has risen. There's a lot of advocacy actually going, against Algeria. Another interesting concept, like I said, UN gets into politics really, really quickly.